Americans have this incredible innate access to incredible opportunities through these different organizations like the RIAs, like the FIBIs, and they're across the country. And someone like myself, where I've come from a country which doesn't have that, I was just like, feed me more, like a thirsty, I don't know, camel in the desert, right? I was just like, this is exactly what I need to just kickstart my career. So for anyone who's listening out there,
right,
definitely don't underestimate the power of these organizations, because they can truly, truly kickstart your career, as they've done with mine, to being better and to meeting partners and to meeting investors and to having opportunities fall at your feet.
I am Christina Suter, and this is the Real Estate Breakthrough Show, where we talk about the reality of real estate, the mindset you need in order to face the reality of what it is, and tips and tricks to get you moving forward in investing. I am your host, Christina Suter. I am so excited. This week, I have Reed Goossens with me. Goossens. I need to say it right. So do that for me, Reed. How do you say it?
Goosens.
Goossens. Oh my God. Reed Goossens. See, I should have practiced, as we were talking before the show started, I should have practiced how to say your name. Instead, I spent the time reading his bio to make sure I understood that one. So Reed, it's wonderful to have you here on the show, and I am glad that you're going to be here. I have some questions I'm super curious about, but let's first start with your bio so that people can get a sense for who you are. And I'm going to go ahead and let's see, there we go. Only 8 years ago in 2012, Reed quit his job in Australia and moved halfway across the world to chase a goal. He moved to the US without a job. He had no established network and no family members for support, but he backed himself and he took a leap of faith. With limited funds, Reed purchased his first property all cash for $38,000 in late 2012. Since then, Reed has co-founded Wildhorn Capital and now controls over $350 million worth of US commercial real estate, and he has achieved financial freedom for himself and in the process. Reed is also the author of 2 best-selling books on Amazon, Investing in the US, The Ultimate Goal to US Real Estate, and 10,000 Miles to the American Dream, Our Story of Financial Freedom. Reed is also the host of the successful podcast called Investing in the US, wherein he interviews real estate investors, business owners, CEOs, entrepreneurs, and go-getters who have successfully achieved financial freedom through investing here in the US. If Reed can move halfway across the world and achieve all that he has in such a short period of time, then so can the average American. So Reed, I love that last line in your bio. I really do, sincerely, because I think it's true. I think that's, what's the purpose of running a podcast in my mind, if it's not to empower others in being able to see the possibility of them investing for themselves and using real estate as their own vehicle for financial freedom. So I love that line. If I emphasized it too much, it's a personal bias to say the least.
No, it is something that is my shtick, right? It's part of who I am. It's part of my superpower. Is like, and we can get into it a little bit, but being from Australia, I come from a country that doesn't have, when I first met you in 2014, I think at your Pasadena real estate RIA event, like I've always come to this country. My first ever thing, when I moved to New York City, within 2 weeks fresh off the boat, I was at my first New York RIA. We don't have RIAs in Australia. We don't have networking, the tapestry that you guys have across the US of this organization, the Real Estate Investment Association. Like I can pay $20, $30 at the door and get this incredible information. Luckily where I was from in Australia, there was one networking event that grew into what you would call a RIA, but that was the only one in the country. And I just happened to live in the city that it was formed in.
Okay.
So coming to the United States, the access to information was so much greater. And your RIA, going to New York RIA, I've been to LA South RIA, like all these different RIAs across, and these FIBI organizations for investor by investor. These are great networking platforms to start your investment career. And to say that, oh, I can't do it. Well, how can I do it? I went and was just like trying to consume as much information as I possibly could when I first moved here, and then go out and start investing. And remember, I'm not from America. I had to change my brain in terms of how you guys think and speak and talk and all those things to then be confident in myself to go out and say, okay, I'm going to go buy my first property for $38,000. So, but the emphasis is that you guys, I keep saying you guys, Americans have this incredible innate access to incredible opportunities through these different organizations like the RIAs, like the FIBIs, and they're across the country. And someone like myself, where I've come from a country which doesn't have that, I was just like, feed me more, like a thirsty, I don't know, camel in the desert, right? I was just like, this is exactly what I need to just kickstart my career. So for anyone who's listening out there,
Right.
definitely don't underestimate the power of these organizations, because they can truly, truly kickstart your career, as they've done with mine, to being better and to meeting partners and to meeting investors and to having opportunities fall at your feet. So that's all I'll say about that.
No, that's perfect and perfectly well said. And that was said beautifully. And I really loved how you put it forward. Now, again, it might be my own bias, right? Like you just, because you're aligning with my own point of view, which is, what's the first thing you want to do when you get into real estate, or you think you want to get into real estate? Do you want to pay $20,000 for a course, or do you want to spend 6 months going to 24 meetings, right? Because 4 weeks in a month, not really, it's 4.3, but that's besides the point, right? Going to right, spending 6 months going to 4 meetings a month, that gets pretty straightforward math, and you get exposure to a huge breadth, not maybe in huge depth, but a huge breadth of what real estate can possibly be. Then you can orient yourself in this extensive field, because it is, when you start to really understand all the pieces that real estate can touch, whether it's notes, whether it's creating, seller financing, whether it's hard money, whether it's direct ownership, whether it's commercial, whether it's retail, whether it's development, you go across this whole spectrum of real estate. There's a lot there, right? There's a lot you can participate in. And the beauty of that is that you can choose, kind of almost regardless of who you are, you can find a spot, because it's so expansive, right? There's no excuse to not be in it, right? You can't say, oh, it's not for me. It's like, no, there's a spot for everybody. Like the designer has a spot, the contractor has a spot, the financial guy has a spot, the attorney has it. Everybody's got a spot in real estate, but you have to find where your spot is, right? And your real estate clubs are one of the best ways to do that. So you got here from Australia. 2 weeks later, you're in a real estate club. Why did you know so quickly you wanted to be in real estate? You needed to get to a real estate club. Like, what was the passion that you obviously brought with you from Australia?
Good question, right? And it goes back to my my actual travels around the world. So to just rewind a little bit, I graduated university in 2007. My background's in structural engineering, and I went straight to London to work on the 2012 Olympic Games as a structural engineer in anticipation. So it was 2008, a lot of infrastructure was being built, and it was a great, Australians have it in our DNA to go travel the world. If you've never been to Australia, it's the largest island in the world, and it's pretty much the same across the country, right? We've only got 24 million people, so it's in our DNA to go travel, and particularly after university, we all like to go abroad, and going to, we're part of the Commonwealth, so going to England and London is just the path well trodden. Through that, I then spent a year in the south of France on super yachts, gallivanting around. If you've ever seen the show Below Deck on Bravo, exactly the same thing. Through that time, actually, that's where I met my now wife, Erica, but at the time we were backpacking in Spain. So fast forward a little bit. So I had this incredible 2 years abroad, living my own life, living on my own terms, just having incredible experiences. And then I find myself back in Australia in early 2010, back at a day job, back in my engineering job, and just going, WTF, like I can't live like this. Like I didn't sign up to do this for the next 30, 40 years of my life. And at the time I didn't know what real estate, I didn't know what entrepreneurship was, but I knew I needed to do more with my life. I needed someone to say, hey, Reed, here's a check every month and go live your life, go travel and surf and do whatever you want. And it was through the sort of the soul searching after being abroad, and I'm sort of mid-20s at this stage, that I stumbled across the book Rich Dad Poor Dad, and that really, really spoke to me, because again, I had that sense of, I felt like I was a star athlete sitting on the bench, watching the game go by or my life go by, and I wasn't taking control. It just wasn't, the corporate world wasn't for me. Now, I'll say it took me many years to leave the corporate world, but it was that start and that passion in Australia where I picked up the book Rich Dad Poor Dad. It really resonated to me. And then from there, it was like, well, a bit more self-awareness. Well, I'm a structural engineer. I'm already rubbing shoulders with developers. Why not real estate? It's like, that's just not duh. Like my dad had a bit of success. He was a high school teacher and had a bit of success in buying some real estate over the years. And I was like, that's a great, like I could have chosen stocks or something else, but I chose real estate. And then through that, and then prior to coming to the United States, I mentioned that the real estate club in Australia in Brisbane, the Brisbane Property Network, and that I just started rocking up to there. I had no idea what to do besides like I just need to surround myself with people who are smarter than I am in this space of real estate, and that's where it started. So when I moved to America, I'd already pretty much had about 2 years of self-education in Australia. I was going to do something in Australia before moving, fix and flip, lease options, like some similar concepts that you probably are aware of and talk about on the show. So when I moved to America, it was like, well, I already know the pattern, right? You got to go to these, you got to get to these events, you got to get to these clubs, because through those clubs, you'll meet people. And I thought the Brisbane one was good. Moving to New York City, it was like on steroids. It was like next level. And I again, back to like how cheap it was 20, $30 at the door. And I'm just getting all this incredible information. And to your point before, all the breadth of knowledge, like these clubs they probably may not go too deep, but it's a great gateway to understand the different elements of real estate and where you can get started and what most resonates with yourself. So I encourage everyone listening to the show and obviously getting involved with as much as you can in terms of those clubs, wherever you live, because it is an opportunity to grow your network, grow your financial IQ, and be surrounded by people who you aspire to be. So that was really all it was. It was just, let's get to these events, let's start, and the rest will fall into place from there.
Perfect. And then from there, you did educate yourself at clubs, but then you bought your first investment with, I don't know how you got a hold of $38,000. I'm sorry, dude, but how'd you get $38,000 to even buy your first investment with cash? Savings. Okay.
It was purely, I was a civil structural engineer. I was well paid, mid-20s, coming back, I'd spent 2 years probably saving that money. And I actually had a little bit more saved, but moving to the United States obviously costs money. It's not cheap. It's not free. And I didn't know, my parents don't come from wealth. So it was my own cash. And that first property was, well, it's my own cash. And I'm willing, if something goes wrong, I'm willing that it's my own money. I don't like, it's not that it would, but I was at that point, Christina, I'd been about 2.5 years of self-educating, including Australia, that I was like, I've got to do something, right? I've got to get off my ass. Excuse me, because we were going to say that, but now I just said that.
You see what I mean? Like the word is just there. It just is, right? Get off my blank, right?
Get off my blank. Get off my blank
and move forward, right?
Yeah, get off my tushy. But the other thing was, the big realization coming to America was the barriers to entry were so much lower than they are in Australia. We don't have secondary and tertiary markets where you can go buy a property for $38,000. We do not have those things because our population isn't there, and we can get into that if you really want. But
when you're very dense, Sydney, Melbourne, Perth, the middle is all,
is nothing, right?
Quote unquote empty. It's not really empty. There are tribes that live there, but there aren't a lot of organized real estate that lives there.
And it's a desert, so it's the most arid. Is the most arid island in the world. And it's approximately the same land mass as mainland America, excluding Alaska, but we only have 24 million people. So when you guys have the 300 million people and you can inhabit north, south, east, west, it just creates these other pockets of diversity. Okay. And so that, in a nutshell. And so when I moved here, I was like, wow, I can buy a property for less than $50,000 and I don't need a bank. And plus no banks would lend to me because I had no credit, right? I didn't even know what a credit score was. So for me, it was, again, go back to the Rich Dad Poor Dad, finding within my means what I could go and get my first deal done. I had my nose stuck in a book, riding the subway to work in New York City, and really just going, I'm not going to get to deal number 10 without doing deal number 1. And the first deal needed to be my deal. I just needed to prove to myself that I could do it. And that's what I could afford. And that's all it was. And I learned a ton along the way, and we can get into those mistakes as well.
What was it? Was it a single family?
It was a triplex, actually. It was actually, okay. When I say triplex, it was a single family and a duplex on the same lot. So it was just, a little triplex. And as a fresh-faced, bushy-eyed Australian, I learnt very quickly what Section 8 housing was all about. But, again, this was my money. It was no one else's money. It was my risk that I wanted to take.
And you owned it all cash. I mean, you would unintentionally, it sounds like, set yourself up for the best opportunity to manage your learning.
Correct.
Because you weren't buying a property that was going to be close to negative. You
Yep.
bought a property where at least something came in, even if the whole thing was fricked up,
Yep.
right? At least you could basically go, okay, I brought home $10.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
Exactly.
there isn't a bank that's threatening to foreclose on me. I'm
Mm-mm.
not having to put my own money into managing, although maybe there was those moments too, where you had to put your own money, your money. I see it
Yep.
on the face. Like, yeah, lady, that's correct. I know those months where I wrote the check into the account to cover the blank, blank, blank of the building.
Yes.
But how'd you go
Yes.
from this steep learning curve of a triplex, which is, to me, from my point of view, is ideal, right?
Mhm.
I mean, that's like you were set up for and we all of us, from Bruce Norris to me to Paul Moore, to pick your name in the field, we all have had a project, at least one, if not multiples, where it's like, okay, this is completely hosed and I'm writing my own money into the account, no matter how hard I've tried. And so we all have the story, right? We all have the story.
Mhm.
So, but how'd you go from this perfect learning curve of a triplex? To me, it's ideal because, you go, there's all that crap that you had to learn quickly, to where you are now. Like, I mean, that's a big jump, right? I mean, it's.
Yeah, look, big jump, but also the challenge, right? The laying down of the gauntlet. The biggest thing that makes me tick of a morning, Christina, is unfulfilled potential, right? I don't want to wake up when I'm, 70 years of age. And even the moving to America thing, right? Like my original plan was to move here and be an expat, live in New York City for a couple of years, chase a girl, see what happens, maybe move back to Australia. That was it. Like, I had no idea, sitting here 9 years later, 300 blah 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 million, it's all numbers now, but it's just a complete swing shift. And so that big leap jump of faith of just the moving to America was always like, that was the scariest thing in my entire life. So then saying, well, hang on, let's up your game was only natural. And it was through some conversations with some friends that I had a buddy who came down from Canada to New York City at the end of 2013. And I vividly remember having a conversation with him over a beer. And we'd gone to university together in Australia, civil engineering. He was a little bit older than I was, but good mates, Canadian guy. And I was like, oh man, I've got a couple of properties in upstate New York and I'm killing it. I'm looking at buying a fix and flip in Philly and blah, blah, blah. And I think I might've been pulling in maybe $1,000 a month over 7 units in upstate New York. Not like nothing to sneeze at, but I was not quitting my job anytime soon, put it that way.
Yes.
He then goes on to tell me, he's like, oh man, that's so awesome. I just actually closed on a 70 unit deal. And I was like, what do you mean? Like 70, like 70? He's like, yes, 70 units. And I was like, how the hell did you do that? And he's, other people's money, mentors, finding, forced appreciation through commercial real estate, all the things that I was applying on my triplex, he was applying on scale, right? Mm-hmm. And the biggest thing I took away from that was a mentor. And up until that point, you mentioned early in the conversation about paying $20,000, $30,000 for a mentor. Well, my $20,000 or $30,000 for a mentor was, no, I'm going to pay 10 or 12, $20 at the door of these REIAs, and I'm going to go buy my $30,000 property and learn that way. That was my putting it off, right? I'd been into it. I'd been pitched enough, and I was like, this is ridiculous. I need to go get my own deal done. This is the only way I'm going to do it. So I'd bought a couple of deals at that point. And I just knew that I was getting to the end of my tether. I was getting to my ceiling of what I could do, right? So I needed to go out and spend my own money on a mentor. And I didn't spend a ton of money. And you probably know who the gentleman is. I don't have to mention names if you don't want to, but it was more to do with the fact that I was then investing in myself, right? I was writing a check to this mentor to say, hey, I'm parting ways with money and I know that I'm better than what I am today. And hopefully, not that this mentor is going to hold my hand, but it's an investment in myself and I take myself seriously. And that act is the most powerful thing of getting the mentor, right? All the knowledge that he provides and having the rebounds and all that sort of stuff. But it's actually the act of like, I take myself seriously. And that there meant that I could lay the foundation to say, Reed, you are going to take this to the next level. You're not just going to cruise along at a W-2 and blah, 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 blah. You want to do this full time, put on your big boy pants. Let's go. And that's how it started. Now, through that came learning about, making yourself likable, building a personal brand, starting a podcast, raising money from other people, building an email list, all these things that I was like, I'm a structural engineer. I've got no idea how the hell to do this. But through my mentor, I was able to learn a bit of his ways. And then through that, I was able to start raising money and be co-GPing on deals. And that whilst I was still working full time. And then eventually I was able to build the confidence, again, pushing that boundary to then say, I can do this by myself. Let's go start chasing my own deals. And through that, was able to secure a deal, my first deal in San Antonio, Texas, and now grow the portfolio to now 12 assets, about 350 million. Now that's happened in 8 or 9 years. That didn't happen overnight. Trust me, guys. There was some low times. And one of the biggest things that I will also say, that what I did was, when I moved from New York City to LA, I quit my engineering job and I went, but I didn't quit the corporate world. What I did was I pivoted. I used my engineering skill set to go and find a job with a developer in Los Angeles. And I worked for 5.5 years building high-end multifamily. So I was still doing my little deals on the side, raising a little bit of money here and there, building my brand and all that sort of stuff over a period of years. But I was also having a day job, the highest paying corporate gig I could find, that I could learn 24/7, working with the big dogs here in LA. And that's what I did. And that was my sort of, because I couldn't stay in this country without having a visa, right? When a job had to attach to a visa. So there's a couple of things in there I'm sure you're going to ask some questions on, but that was really the journey towards where I am today, and building the brand and building the company.
You know, actually, I'm not going to ask a lot of questions on it, believe it or not. The reason why I'm not going to ask the questions is because that's sort of like, to me, that's the ideal journey, right? I mean, me, I'm sorry, I apologize. But to me, that's the ideal journey, because there are people who are like, I'm going to quit my job. I'm not going to get another job. And I'm going to, show up as a full-time real estate investor today.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like,
nah, don't do that.
No, no. It's always like, but maybe again, I had a job. I wasn't a civil engineer. I was a teacher, and I worked in childcare, and I worked as a receptionist, and I just did jobs, right? Just what do young Americans do in their 20s? What jobs do we get? Like, I was 17 and I worked as a receptionist for a company that was run by 3 Persian brothers, and I remember him standing in front of my desk yelling at me and then buying me lunch, right? like, oh, here, we buy the whole company lunch, so we're going to buy you lunch. So this sort of very, dramatic culture, right? But I'm 7 and I'm like, okay, I'll do what I need to do, because, you got JOB and you're heading to college, and, you got to work it out, right? And so, I had a job while I started investing, and the investing I never thought would be my full-time gig, but it became what I was successful at. I was more successful in that than I was in my other gigs. And I finally went, well, what am I doing jobs that I'm not feel as successful in as I do in my own real estate investing? And right. So that was my big transition point. But so it's good that you kind of kept the JOB, but you also used it to double down on your own education.
Yep.
Right? I mean, that depth of commitment to not only get the mentor, to educate yourself, to spend hours and hours educating yourself. You also took a job that aligned with your capacity to go where you wanted to go, where I was 100%. Not nearly as well organized. Right?
And look, Christina, as you say it back to me, I'm like, yeah,
it sounds organized, right?
It sounds organized. It was more just like, again, being comfortable with like, hey, I've got a skill set here. Like what chips I've got on the table, right? Okay, I need a job. I've got this skill set. Maybe someone could be interested. Like, maybe I should just let's have a go. Let's just see what happens, right? I've already moved halfway across the world, and I've already got a couple of jobs. Like, let's just, and through the engineering firm I worked at, the little guy, my sort of mentee that I was he was sitting next to me, my cubicle buddy, I called him. I actually introduced him to Richard Porter, and he's like, dude, I love this book. I can't put it down. Like, what do you want me to do? And I was like, give me all the emails of the developers you work with, and I'm going to email them. And I just blasted them through my personal email account, and someone got back to me. And again, looking within yourself and saying, I've got a skill set that I can be valuable to someone else, and I can continue to, but in return, I get to also keep food on the table and the roof over my head, but I can continue learning. That was probably, looking back on it, I didn't think it at the time, but I was like, that was pretty good. That was a good move.
That was actually pretty smart of you. Honestly, you can just take ownership for that. Even if it was unintentional, even if it was just pure gut instinct and pure gut brilliance driving you forward, I'd say it was a good move. It was a good move. So people out there listening to the show, like, think about what you have to give in any capacity. That, and part of, I talk a little bit about when you're raising capital, we don't have to get into it, but the professionalism, right? Everyone has professionalism. Everyone is not born with 10 years worth of real estate experience. We're punctual. We can dress well. We can, articulate. We can write well. We can good with numbers. Whatever your skill set might be, can be valuable to someone else. And using that as an entry point, whilst keeping the roof over your head, but continue to learn,
is super powerful, because that helped me also relieve the pressure of my own internal, you got to be here, 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 you got to be here. And just say, look, this is a good stepping stone. You might not be where you are today, but it's a stepping stone in the right direction.
I teach a course, I call it the Mastermind Course or the workshop, and I teach it's for brand new investors, right? Whether they're wanting to be on the JOB side or whether they're wanting to be on the investor side, right? It's for brand new investors who are interested in figuring out who they're going to be in this investment world. Like the first whole, I call them module. The first module is all about them defining who they are in relationship to real estate. Like, where's my talent? What do I want to do? What's the vision in my head? Where do I think I'm going? How do I plan today to get myself a job or to get myself experience in moving in the direction of what I think I want to be in 30 years, right? And you can plan that today. Like this, like it doesn't have to be, and you did that. That's why it's so brilliant to me, is because I tell people to do that. And you did that. You did it unconsciously, but that's exactly it. Like, how do I double down on my strengths? How do I find a JOB that lets me get paid while I'm developing a portfolio, even if it's just starting with a little tiny single family out of state, something, anything that gets you participating in the field, right? And you can totally have parallel, like my job is in real estate and my investments are in, so you're preaching what I preach. So I apologize for that, but hey,
That's all right.
There you go. You're preaching what I preach. So let's talk a little bit about the expertise of your particular company, right? So you started in single family, but you jumped over to a different asset class, and now you have quite an impressive portfolio of $350 million underneath your company, underneath your advisement. So tell me about that, and tell me about some of the skill sets you had to learn to get there. So tell me about that first, though.
Yeah. So we're in the syndication business. I'm sure you talk a little bit about this at your club and on the show. So we're in the business of pooling investors' capital together and going out and buying assets that we individually can't buy ourselves. If we had all the money in the world, we would just do it by ourselves and not have any, not need anyone else's money. So we're leveraging other people. They're leveraging our skill set of finding deals and operating deals effectively. And it's a win-win scenario for both parties. And so we look at multifamily asset class, specifically in the value add, class C, class B, sometimes in the class A. We're starting to branch out into that. And we're looking in more affordable markets across the United States. Specifically, we're in Austin and San Antonio. The reason we're in those specific markets is my business partner is based there. So he is the boots on the ground. I'm based in Los Angeles. And we built the company through, he had a skill set that I didn't have, which was being physically on the ground. And I had a skill set that he didn't have, which was come from the institutional project management, engineering type of mindset into the details. He was into marketing. He was into, advertising. So he didn't have that attention to detail. So we're very much a yin to our yang, my yin to his yang, sorry. And that's the business, right? We raise money and we've raised money deal by deal, bootstrapped every single deal. I still remember that first one. I've got a gray patch in the back of my head from the stress, but we got it done. And through getting it done, we're able to prove that we're performers, and we're able to get deal number 2 done. And by getting deal number 2 done, we've got deal number 3 done. And it's all about starting with that first deal. And even back to my triplex, it proved to me that I could do the triplex. And then as you grow, when we do the first big deal, 192 units by ourselves, it was like, oh gosh, this is stressful. But I'd already been a co-GP on 3 or 4 other deals prior to that. I already started building my network. I'd already started raising money, small amounts of money successfully. But that, again, all the stepping stones to keep pushing that envelope to say, I'm worth it and I can go to that next level. And that's how it morphed from mentor into, or getting a mentor into the company we've grown today. And it continues to grow to, we're now attracting private equity companies. So, we have historically raised money from friends and family, $50,000 at a time. Now we're pivoting a little bit to go into the more private equity world, where it's one check writing, but you had to build up a track record to get to that stage.
Yeah.
So back to your original question, we're in the business of syndication through multifamily in Central Texas, which is our niche.
So what's the particular bracket that you guys work in? Because there are different people who do different pieces of the multifamily market, whether they do A, value add, or A, stabilized, right? Whereas you kind of hinted at, you do B and C's, value adds. are they primary city? They secondary to
Yep.
Austin and San, you know?
Yep. So it's all primary. So San Antonio and Austin. Our thesis is the growing cities, right? And again, a little bit of my special, I don't know if I call it superpower, but I see when I first moved to the United States and I saw the growth in Texas, particularly the corridor between San Antonio and Austin, and across a number of other cities, you know, in Florida, in Denver, in Charlotte, like there's these secondary cities that are more affordable, that is just a flight of capital from the coast going to these markets.
Yep.
But they're now transitioning into coastal markets. Like Austin is the sort of poster child of like this massive transition. There's 3 direct flights a week to Europe, right? You're getting on a plane, you're going from Austin to Europe. Like that's on the map, right? That is something that I'm taking very much close attention to. Also, I'm paying close attention to the barriers to entry of new product. I built stuff with the developer here in Long Beach and Los Angeles. It's a pretty, you know, litigious sort of entry point when you're trying to develop stuff. Getting approved through the city can take many years. Austin is similar to that. It's not as, Houston's very open and developer friendly, and Austin has a bit of a barrier. So when you have that barrier, but you have the demand there, then your supply is constrained. So buying existing assets now starts looking like a coastal market, right? You also have the growth of the Teslas of the world and the Oracles of the world moving there. So you have this hype. And so our thesis has always been to invest in growing markets that were affordable, but are transitioning, and we're trying to ride that wave. Now, the wave won't always be there forever, but for right now, we are trying to make strategic decisions in and around buying core plus value add Class B product in growing submarkets through San Antonio and Austin, Texas.
Nice. Good summary. Perfect. No, that makes sense. And so when you focus on the value add, is it specifically underperforming, or is it really just, you know, is it really like rehab, or is it both? Is it whatever you find?
It's a little bit whatever we find, but also both.
Okay.
We've also started to look at understanding where the development curve may go in the future. So what I mean by that is there's obviously the putting the lipstick on a pig, right? There's the buying in 1980s, trying to, you know, increase the rent bumps have got to be there. That's a minimum. Like we have to be able to get a good 15% ROI on our investment. If we put in $7,000 to a unit, we need to increase it by X, you know, $100, $120, and there needs to be data there to support that. Otherwise, it's just not a value add. That won't produce cash flow for our investors. But in terms of exit strategies in the future, we also then are now looking at density, right? So these are older assets that are coming up to 30, 40, maybe even 40 years, 45 years of age. Maybe in 5 to 6 years time, and the development cycle comes back around again, we can sell it to the developer. We can increase the density because it naturally already has the buy right in it, and it's in certain pockets where we know the path of progress is going to occur. So being a little bit strategic in that. Now, we didn't go in when we first bought our first deals. That wasn't really in our minds. It was all about adding that value. But that's kind of how you got to start to think about it these days. As these older assets start continuing to be older, what's the next, you know, evolution of this asset going to look like? And maybe there's a value there to someone in the future. Not that you're underwriting to an exit for that, but you need to keep that in the back of your mind. So back to your original question, it definitely has to have a fundamental rental growth story to appease the current cash flow protocols that we give to our investors. But it also then has the sheer volume, so the NOI growth. And then we also want to make sure there's operational efficiency. And we also want to see if you know, the cherry on top, that we could have maybe a development, you know, sell it to a developer in the future, or re-entitle it for higher density if we need be.
Nice. Right. Because I mean, a lot of times, again, I'm not as expert in the multi-unit market. I have owned in the multi-unit market, but I'm not expert. And one of the things that I've noticed is if you have underperforming, as in not, you know, the units have a high level of vacancy in comparison to the neighborhood that's around it, there usually are operational inefficiencies, and there usually is deferred maintenance. Those kind of all end up rolling together in my experience.
Yep.
Right. Because you're looking at the mom and pop owner who, like, I bought a 30 unit in Knoxville, Tennessee. Mom and pop owner, his wife had cancer. God bless him and his wife. I don't know today whether they're still, you know, how she is today, but, you know, he needed to get rid of the building. It was 50% vacant, you know, and so there's obviously operational inefficiencies. He had storage. He was using some of the units for storage units of his own stuff. Like, you know, there's just like, okay, dude, like, this building can definitely perform a little better, and we understand your story. We understand why it's not performing, and we'll fix it. We can fix it, right? What's important is, when I tell my students or my clients, the people that I mentor one-on-one, like if it's got if it's distressed, that's actually not a bad thing.
No,
the real question is whether you can manage the distress. That's the question.
Yep.
Right. So that makes perfect sense. So do you guys hold on to your buildings over time, and therefore when people invest with you, they're invested with you over longer than 5 to 7 years? Is that the intention, or is it really you're going to rotate the building?
Rotate the building. It's always, because when we first get started, investors, when you raise money, for those people who haven't raised money, they want to see an exit. They don't want to see, but give me your money and I'm never going to give it back to you.
That's exactly my investor brain's going, okay, so if I would invest with you, like, what's my exit plan, dude?
Exactly. Right? And that's why we always buy on a per deal basis. You're investing in ABC Smith Street, in San Antonio, Texas. It's not, you're going to invest into a fund and we may buy these deals, we may not. Like, we're not at that stage yet. We're still at a very bootstrapping deal by deal scenario. And so when we buy those deals, we're looking at a 3 to 7 year exit. We probably are pro forma a 5-year exit, but we're exiting 2 deals right now that we're in 2.5 years into the deal, right? And our loan has come, we had a bridge loan on it. And we're about to sell it for a nice little profit. And for us as a company, we've got all these deals under management, and it all sounds impressive, but now people want to start to see, well, where's your skins on the wall? Where's your full runs, right? What return of capital? And that's where we've now had to focus on, okay, what deals can we start to dispose of and make a good profit to say to the next investor, that we're trying to attract, hey, we got a return of a capital of X for these investors on this deal. Plus, we want to rinse and repeat the investors that were in that deal, right? So we can buy more deals.
Exactly.
So it's a self-feeding business once you get it going, but it's getting that first couple of deals off the ground to prove yourself. And now for us, we're at this sort of evolution that we've got to now start to say, okay, let's get rid of those first couple that we bought all those years ago, so we can prove to our investors that we can do what we promised. So that's where we are right now. And we're seeing some really good traction in that, and we're looking to close two deals here in the next 15 days. So we're pretty excited.
That is exciting. That's lovely.
Yeah.
Because I assume also you guys get a payout along with your investors, right?
Yes.
So that's going to be a nice little payday for you guys as well.
It will be a nice little payday. Obviously, the exponential curve, if we actually held it for 5 years, we'd get paid more, but the investors are getting a good return today. So let's sell, right?
Well, and let's talk about today. Let's just take a moment to talk about today. So we're in to timestamp this video, which I try not to do, but we're in COVID, but we're a year in. So this is April of 2022. I was about to say March. This is April of 2021. And so we're a year into COVID. And, the multi-unit market has not been affected the way that we anticipated it was going to. So what are you finding boots on the ground as reality with your units, primarily in Texas? And so let's start with that question.
Yeah. So from a high level point of view, I think, we and earlier in the green room before we press record, you're going to ask about like the trials and tribulations. Well, this COVID, the last 12 months has been
that is my question. Exactly.
The COVID has been my proof of a recession. We are in a recession. If you don't think we are in one. And this was the biggest hit to young operators like myself that we needed to navigate, right? And we proved to our investors we come out the other side.
Yeah, it was negative 3.5 GDP for 2020.
Correct.
The numbers have finally come in. So there we go. So continue.
Yep. And so, and COVID probably masked, in my opinion, a lot of other fundamental issues in the business world and in the money markets world that we won't get into. But it ultimately, I don't know.
I'm going to get into it.
Well, the valuation of businesses on the stock market, where they have just these massive valuations but they produce nothing. Right. But that also then there's a knock-on effect to what we do and what we serve, which is the sort of the blue to tan collar type of client, where it's hourly wages, $30,000 to $50,000 to $60,000 incomes, and those people got massively affected in COVID. And so in return, we did see, depending on the asset class, we saw some hurt, right? People who were in hourly jobs, were in the service industry, who just said, this isn't, you now don't have a job anymore, right? You now can't pay your rent. We were concerned about that. We're very concerned about that back in March a year ago. fast forward, we probably had on average about 7 to 8% delinquency across the 2,600 units that we have. Not too bad. Not too bad. There are some assets that, depending on how they were in their life cycle of the value add and the transitioning process, struggled a little bit more than others. So what do I mean by that? Well, every asset we buy, we try to go in and turn the demographics. So maybe the average income might be $45,000 when we buy an asset. We want to increase that to $60,000 because we're better improving the amenities. We're increasing the rent by our renovation. So when you do a 3 times income ratio, certain people can't qualify anymore, right?
Okay.
It's not, I'm not trying to be a meanie, it's just the business plan, and that's what we've got to do, right? So depending on where COVID hit and where you are on that cycle, turning a rent roll can take up to 24 months. It can take a long period of time.
Oh yeah.
So when the COVID hit, those assets were in that transition, we saw more hurt on those assets. The ones that are already through that, like, did even better, right? Okay. So it was just really where you were. And the headline is, did a multifamily outperformed retail, hospitality, most other commercial assets? I know self-storage and industrial did really, really well.
That's right.
But in general, when you compare it to office space, when you compare it to other major retail investing type of opportunities,
retail and hospitality and
hotels,
all of that, they were had a much higher effect and downturn from this. But multi-units, which we thought was going to have a high downturn, you're testifying and confirming, no, they did not, and you guys didn't experience that.
And we're seeing a compression even further of cap rates in deals that, because people are seeing, one, people are flying out of the coastal markets into central markets. 2, multifamily just continued to chug along, relatively unaffected. So that is attracting more capital, and people need a roof over their heads, right? So all these things have made the asset class in itself still very, very desirable, particularly as we come here in sort of out, I don't want to say out, but starting to head towards an exit of hopefully COVID. But yeah, extremely interesting, extremely stressful times in the beginning, but we navigated through it, and that, to me, there was no major issues. We obviously dealt with some very uncharted territories, and there were some bumps along the way, but we got through it the other side. We had to pause distributions for a couple of months, a couple of quarters, which investors understood. Right. But the big thing for me was that we also had to take a realization that this, unlike 2008, this was a global issue, right? 2008 was a US-based issue which had massive ripple effects around the world.
I was going to say, it was definitely an international issue. There were some other countries that were struggling as much as we were, but yes, US.
But it started in the United States where rent was due in COVID times in Mexico, in Australia, in the US, in
it was all
the
equal hit to all countries.
Correct.
If not even more severe in some other countries than our own.
Correct. Yes. That's great. And so when you compare to where we've come from to where we are today, it's now, as we look forward, it's how each city will get out of the gate, each country will get out of the gate back to some sort of normalcy. And depending on where your investments are, it's kind of you've taken the bet on investing where you are. So if you're investing in New York or LA compared to Texas, they might have some different protocols. So how that gets back to normalcy, with people getting confidence in the market to go out and spend their dollars again and go back to retail stores and go back to concerts and bars and all that sort of stuff, affects how confident people will then pay their rent, right? Or then get back to normalcy.
Yes. Well, and the projection, at least UCLA Anderson, right? So UCLA Anderson recently, released their first quarter update for 2021, and their projection, and I assume they get the numbers from somebody else, and I should have paid attention to that. But the projection they're putting out is that we're looking at the highest GDP than we've seen for over 20 years because of the pent-up demand, because of the forced isolation, because if you listen to, Ted McAvoy, or you listen to Neil Bawa, because of the fact that we've effectively overfunded, you could say, the amount of loss we expected in our GDP. We were anticipating 5 to 6% loss in our GDP. We experienced 3.5% loss in our GDP. If you just do sheer numbers, we've effectively put out the same amount of dollars into our country through our stimulus programs as we lost in our GDP. So as far as cash moving through the system, some of that has just been absorbed through just these stimulus programs. And now people have been saving. There's a higher savings rate, people are, and I know I've been saving, I know my clients have been saving more. I know from, from talking to people beyond myself that there really is a bigger savings account. And I'm looking forward to going to a movie. Like that's my big thing. I just want to go to a movie, right? But
Haven't gone to a
and other people
drive-through
are the
yet?
same, huh?
You haven't gone through a drive-through yet? A drive-in?
Oh, no,
at
no.
Paramount?
We've gone to drive-in movies. I want to go to a movie,
Got
sit
it.
in a chair,
Got it.
sit next to my family and eat popcorn and have my dibs. That's what I
Yep.
want. That's like that's my pandemic is over. Is I go to a movie, right? So, but everybody has their version of that. Whether it's travel, whether it's, going to restaurants and eating in the restaurant, whether we stopped doing dry cleaning. So we didn't have to leave the house to drop our dry cleaning off or pick it up. Right. So now I've been wearing nothing but shirts that are washable for a year. Right?
So you want to get dressed up is what you're saying.
Well, I guess I could get dressed up. I guess I could, to go to a movie. I guess I could get dressed up. But yes, the whole point is all this pent up demand.
Yep.
And that's going to force this wave of increased GDP and probably help heal a lot of sectors. And it isn't the multi-unit sector that's going to need to be healed, which we thought it was going to be. It's going to be travel, hospitality, right? Retail, right? Whether it's getting your nails done or whether it's going to your local bar. If you're from England, like the local bars, like
pubs.
Right. Going to the pub. That was, that's their movie theater, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
Right?
And I'll say that tourism is always the number one thing to get hit in these sort of things, in these crises, because people, tighten the purse strings and say, I can't travel.
And it's discretionary.
Yep, exactly.
Sorry, I spoke over you. I apologize.
That's fine. That's exactly what I was
and that's the beauty of multi-units, right? Which is what you guys specialize in, is people always need a house. And that's why you're saying that works.
Correct.
So do I get you for a couple more minutes, or do you have
sure.
11:30?
Yeah, no,
Okay.
that's it.
Okay, good. I don't have an 11:30. Bree will cut out these two little brackets of weird conversations. She will cut them out. So let me move on and let me talk a little bit about, real estate is a lot of fun, and real estate, I've made money and lost money in real estate over my 30 years of investing. And I've been deeply challenged in the Great Recession and the big downturn, right, that we had. That was hugely challenging for me. And I find that a lot of investors who've been investing for a while, as you have, that they're sort of like, what was your worst investment? Like, what was your worst investment? What'd you do to fix it? Because we either got to fix it or we got to abandon it, right? So what'd you do to fix it? And what'd you learn? Real estate is a pain in the see, there it is. Real estate is a pain in the backside. We've all lost money in real estate, right? We've all had difficult times. I know I've been investing for 30 years and I've had some difficult times in real estate, and it really makes me question, right? You clearly, as a longer term investor, have had some difficult times in real estate too. So what is your worst story, or what's one of your tough stories in real estate? How did you solve it? And what's the lesson you learned?
Look, there's a couple, nothing catastrophic, otherwise I wouldn't be sitting here today, right?
Exactly.
But it was actually the first couple out of the gate. My first ever deal, that triplex, had a drive-by shooting at it. No one was hurt, which was good, but it was sort of a wake-up call. Like that could have scared me to be like, I'm not touching this again, right? And I wouldn't be sitting here today. So that was one. Another one, I flipped a house in Philadelphia. Just took way too long to get the job done. Even with my experience in managing projects, it was just the incompetency of the general contractor. He stole product from us. We found it on other job sites. It just, a 6-month project turned into an 18-month project, and there goes your profit, right? So,
yes, absolutely.
I had to come out of pocket myself. Actually, that was the first time I raised money from my family, and I made sure that they were made whole and had some return, which meant I had to dip into my own pocket. But it was a lesson learned of, like, this is what you have to do if you're going to raise money from other people. Yeah. In terms of, where the recent COVID, we spoke about that. There was times there where we were like, what's going to happen? Like, back at the end of March, we were like, yeah, guys, we're going to pause distributions and we don't know what this roller coaster is going to be like. So now looking back at it, we've learned so much more. Lessons learned on a wide range of things is that we're in the people business. Whether you're fixing or flipping houses, or you just have tenants, you're in the people business, right? We're in the business of providing housing and shelter, and thus people's needs and interests need to come first. So what I mean by that? Well, when the pandemic hit, we needed to get in front of it and say to our tenants, hey tenants, we know you may have lost your job because not through no fault of your own, right? So we need to know, we need to let you know that we're here for you as best we can. We obviously want you to continue to pay your rent, but we also want you to feel safe and know that we're going to work with you. We can't evict you, but we're not going to be the big bad landlord. We also had to do that with our on-site staff, making sure they felt safe, making sure their needs were met. We had to do that with our investors, right? Making sure that, hey, investors, yeah, life is not going to, we don't know what's coming. And thus we're going to pause distributions and we need to keep cash on hand. Difficult conversations to be had. People were comparing assets across, oh, well, my other asset keeps going, kept paying me interest. It's like, well, we're being cautious. We're just a different operator. So we had to have some very challenging conversations with our investors just to say, we're doing the right fiduciary responsibility to keep your investment safe and we're keeping cash on hand and thus not distributing to you. And then the final thing was making sure our lenders were all aware of the issues that were going on site, making sure our communication was up. So they knew that, yeah, we're not going to apply for forbearance. We don't need to apply for forbearance, but we still needed to have those conversations. Now, again, ask me at my birthday, which is March 24th every year, March 24th last year, we were all sweating a little bit. We didn't know. We didn't know April's coming, rent's due, May's coming, rent's due. What's going to happen? So the lessons learned is that we're in the people business, regardless of what you do. And it's about managing people's expectations, both investors, tenants, lenders, buyers, sellers, all that type of stuff, because we need to make sure that we move through uncertain times as one unit, and having effective communication is the best policy. And over communicating in my mind is better than nothing at all. So there's some of the lessons. Again, I wouldn't be sitting here if I'd lost my shirt. I continue to, and I think the biggest thing is also understanding that we aren't perfect, right? We're always constantly learning, and we will look back on COVID and make better decisions as we move forward into our future investments, right? Looking at the lessons that we probably could have done better and change it for the future. And if we're not always willing to come from that point of view or come from that mindset, then you will end up being a failure at whatever you do in life. And so constantly learning from your quote unquote mistakes is something that makes you stronger and makes you more wiser. Yeah. Makes you wiser. Sorry, not more wiser.
No, I think you described that very well. If you can't choose to do that, then your world gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And what you can choose to do in your life gets less and less and less and less. Correct. Or you can choose to learn from your mistakes and at least keep your bandwidth the same, or maybe even wider, right?
Exactly.
Because you choose to learn from them. Otherwise, it's well known in psychology, you can keep shutting yourself down, but it's only going to get harder if you do that.
Exactly.
Right?
Yep.
So financial freedom, it's even in your bio, financial freedom. It's one of my personal passions is financial freedom. I believe that's why people invest in real estate, is not because of their love of owning a physical building. They want to walk up and kiss their building every day. It's not like that. It's like, no, my building serves a purpose of serving financial freedom. It serves people as an asset class, but it also serves a purpose in that it serves myself and my family. So financial freedom, what does financial freedom mean to you? Right? You've even declared that you've reached it. So I don't need to ask that question. What does financial freedom mean to you? And what does that even look like as a daily process?
Yeah, and there's different levels of financial freedom, right? There is the financial freedom where I think you can, they talk about going out to dinner and you don't even worry about what it costs, and you can put it on the credit card, right? And then there's a financial freedom of, okay, I've replaced my side hustle is as much or more than my day job. So there's a financial freedom there. I don't have to answer to a boss. And my North Star for when I first moved here was to not have to answer to a boss. My time is the most valuable asset. Now it's, so I got to those different stages along the way. Now I'm at a stage where I control my own time. I control what I do in a day. And truly it's my definition of financial freedom, I think it's Tony Robbins who says this, is you do what you want, when you want, with who you want, as much as you want. Right. And being in my mid 30s, I still have a long way to go. Like I'm not sitting back on a beach and retiring, but I'm at so much further towards my goals and aspirations that I'm controlling my time better. I don't have to ask for time off. If I want to go away, goodbye. Okay, I'm going for 2 weeks. See you later. But I do have, some sort of responsibilities, which is a little bit different when you start a real estate business and you raise money from other people. So it just looks a little different, but I'm controlling my own time, which is the most important thing right now.
Right. So I'll share the story and then we'll bring it to a close. So when I hit financially free, right, and there's this concept in America like, oh man, you can retire, which means you can do nothing, right? And I did nothing for a while and I was so unhappy. I was like, oh my God, I so hate doing nothing. There's no sense of purpose in my life. There's no sense of direction. I feel like I'm floating along on lily air. And to me, maybe, it's funny because, one would think I'm as much a creative as I am linear. So one would think I would love that. If you know me personally, my personal life, but no, actually I don't. I actually don't love this sort of like meandering, lost feeling. And I was like, I had to find something purposeful to do with my time. Financial freedom was important to me, obviously, because I hate 9-to-5 jobs. I mean, I hate them. I do not do well with them. My world gets smaller, not bigger when I'm doing a 9-to-5 job, right? So I really don't like them. But at the same time, I had to have something that was a sense of purpose and direction. So for me, my financial freedom is about having choice over my purpose and direction and being able to implement that with joy.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So, and I suspect, given your whole story that we've described of having this sort of unintentional drive or intentional drive towards sense of self and sense of financial freedom, like, dude, I don't ever see you fully retiring. I'm just telling you, I just want to let you know now, like, I don't think it's going to happen.
I don't think so either, Christina. I think but you hit on some good points, like the value of self-worth, right? And I think the other thing that I've come to realize in the last 5 years since sort of quitting the day job is the North Star can change, right? The North Star for such a long period of time is quit the job, but like get out, like. But then now it's like, okay, what's the new North Star, right? And it will change over time. And when I eventually start to have kids, it will change again, right? You asked about earlier in the green room, a personal story. Well, through this journey, I actually lost my mum. And when she made it out to my wedding when I was 31 years of age. I said, I just turned 35. She died 6 months later and she died in Australia. And I got home just in time. But it had a big self-reflection of like, what the hell am I doing with my life? Meaning, I'm out here in America. Is it selfish that I'm out here trying to chase my dreams? And I knew that she would never say it was. She would always support me. But there is a point where you're like, all right, enough's enough. And like literally that, I think within a couple of weeks after that, I'd quit my day job. I was like, I'm going all in. I'd already spent all this time and I was playing it cautious and making sure I had enough side, income. And I'd already had 2 or 3 deals under, but it was just like, put up or shut up sort of thing. Like, and it was that realization that time is short. And the other realization I had was enjoy the journey. Like there's some parts of it that, yes, it may not take as long. It may take you longer and that's okay. Right. And we always want instant gratification, but also realizing having loss in one's life, you start to realize that if I'm not going to be present and enjoy the journey and the building process towards financial freedom or whatever the goal may be, you're going to ultimately end up in a world of just dissatisfaction, annoyed, frustrated, anxiety. And that's something that I always try and tell people is like, if it takes you 10 years, if it takes you 20 years to reach financial freedom, that is okay. You know what? It's not a competition. No one's judging you. Run your own race. And that was probably what some of the biggest life lessons I've learned in the last sort of 4 to 5 years through losing someone that I obviously very close to me. That is really put it into perspective. And it sort of goes back around to purpose and drive and things can change as life changes. And you don't want to miss out on opportunities in life because that's what we're here for. We're here to enjoy it and live our best life possible.
On that beautifully said note, if people want to get a hold of you, they want to invest, how do they get a hold of you? I'm going to pop here over to your website. So we know that, why don't you fill us in? I'll let you introduce us here. Go ahead.
The easiest way is just you can put invest with, click on the invest with Reed. It will take you to a very small contact page, and that will come directly to my email, and we can go from there and make sure that we're accredited and all that sort of stuff. The other way you can reach out to me is just by sending me an email at info. That's info@reedgoosens.com.
Okay, and let's spell out for those who are listening to this on a podcast instead of on like YouTube, which is where we're going to also have this in Roku TV. So we've got a Roku TV channel and YouTube, but it also goes out as, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and a variety of other podcast platforms.
Love it.
So
Love it.
spell it
It is
out.
info, info at reedgoossens.com. That's reedgoossens.com. A lot of double E's, double O's, double S's. Make sure you got them all in there.
That's right. That's right.
And look, I always offer people, if they are in Los Angeles, they're traveling through here, they want to just meet up for a socially distanced coffee, I'm more than happy to share some time with people who are interested and just want to talk shop. And yeah, that's really the best way of doing it. You can also reach me on, you can listen to my podcast, which is called Investing in the US. You can Google my name, it will come up. And I'm just an open book. So I appreciate the time, Christina. It's been an incredible journey. All those years ago, coming to your first Pasadena FIBI event.
Yes,
and now
I actually remember
today.
you walking up to me because you're relatively tall. So I actually remember you walking up to me and going, "Oh, hi." I'm not a short person, right? So when in my heels, right,
Yep.
But I remember this sort of long, lanky guy walking up to me, all put together, going, "Hi, I'm Reed," and I'm like, "Oh, hi, nice to meet you, Reed." And you already had that professionalism. Maybe it's the engineering background or whatever that had that sense of professionalism already in there. But I do remember, at least my memory of our first meeting was you walking up to me at my FIBI meeting. So,
well, very kind. And it's awesome it's come full circle and can provide just a little bit of inspiration here to your listeners today.
Yes.
So yeah.
Yes, I'd say you offered a lot of inspiration and a good quality of information as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right. Thank you so much for listening to Christina Sue, the Real Estate Breakthrough Show. So appreciate you having you here. You can find us on Roku TV or YouTube, or you can find us, of course, on iHeartRadio, Spotify, and a variety of other podcast platforms. Please go to FIBIPasadena.com for lots of free videos, and the same with Christina Suter at YouTube as well for lots of free videos and information. My hope is to educate you so that you can become a professional real estate investor. Thank you so much.